Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we ask guests to tell us your story. Hello there, this is Dr. James W. Smith, your host. We seek to transform lives by encouraging and inspiring. Someone encouraged and inspired this host, former lawyer, gambler, inmate, and his life was transformed. The same can happen to you. So when you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please support this podcast with a donation or a monthly recurring amount for as little as $3. If you're viewing any of the podcasts on YouTube, please subscribe. To supporters of this podcast, we say thank you. Check out my encouraging, inspiring, and transforming books. I'm available for speaking engagements, in person and virtual seminars. So please uh, contact me through my website, www.dealbyme.com. I have with me Robert Wolf, who is the author of Not a Real Enemy. It is the true story of his father's amazing story of living as a Jewish man in Hungary when the Nazis and later the communists seized power. This Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom relies on his wits and good fortune to escape the Nazis, not once, but twice. I think you're going to really enjoy this interview, and I ask that you really, really just support uh, this uh, podcast and consider this book as we will go through this discussion with Dr. Wolf. Brother Wolf, this is the Did By Me podcast, and I just want to ask you now if you will share just a little bit about yourself and where you've been interviewed from.
Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Smith. I much appreciate it. I appreciate your time and your support, and thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm Rob Wolf. I'm a radiologist. I'm a neuroradiologist. I've been practicing for 35 years. The last 18 or so part-time. I'm still doing it part-time, Wednesdays and Thursdays. I was born in Detroit. My parents are both from Hungary. I was raised in suburban Detroit through 12th grade. Fortunate enough to go to Tufts University for undergrad, University of Michigan Medical School. I did my training, my radiology at Brown in Providence, neuroradiology fellowship at Yale. And by the time I was done with all that, I was 30 years old. So my indentured servantry was over finally, and I started making a living at 30. So my book I wrote about my mom and dad. We can talk about that in a few minutes. That's been my joy. That's been my heartfelt project the last 6 years. That's been my legacy for my parents. I am the only child of only children. So when I'm gone, that's it. And so I leave back to the world my parents' often harrowing stories and many messages within the book.
Well, since you're talking about the children, let me ask you this question. Do you have any children of your own now?
No, I have two wonderful stepdaughters from
Okay.
former marriage and three beautiful step grandkids. The
Okay.
youngest is going to graduate high school next year. The other two have graduated college. Two of the kids have already been to the Holocaust Museum and sent me pictures of them holding the book and telling the staff about me. And that's such a pleasing thing,
Okay.
as they are not Jewish, but they support what I'm doing. They support my fight against anti-Semitism. And it's fantastic having a family like that.
Okay. Well, Dr. Wolf, I read your profile. Very interesting. And I think I understand where you going and what you're all about. You've written this uh, book uh, as a biography of your father's amazing story of living as a Jewish man in Hungary when Nazis and later the communists seized power. So as we think through this, I want to ask you, what are some of the most important messages that you're trying to convey to listeners of this podcast?
Well, like you said, yep, it is a biography about my dad, but it's also a history of Hungary that covers World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. We can carve up a few details if you want.
Mhm.
The messages are many. There are too many to count, but when I first turned my dad's autobiography into a biography, which originally that's how he did it. He wrote his memoirs with my mom back in the 70s. and we could talk about the history of the book a little bit too if you want. But
Mhm.
I was inspired by what I had read, realizing how many miracles. So there's one message that I can't imagine one man, one person having so many miracles in his life and surviving all that he did. Dad was a four-time escape artist, so there's the argument of resilience. We talk about the message of survival. We talk about the message of determination, and the message of integrity and hope. Despite what it was like to be a Hungarian Jew back in the 30s when the persecution started, all the way well into the 50s, even after my parents escaped from the country itself, because they had had
Mhm.
enough. Two wars, Nazi Hungary, Communist Hungary. Another
Okay.
message is how we should appreciate the free world here, because the dark world, we complain about government and things and waiting in line too long and some of our inconveniences. But when you read this book, you'll say we have it pretty damn good in this country and in the free world too. And let's just hope we don't blow it. There's so many other things. You can change vectors. But my dad's sense of survival, the many miracles, four escapes, that just inspired me to share this book. It was very motivational to me. So
Okay, well, I think you've already kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask you, but if you want to elaborate on it a little bit more, you can. Uh, is, why did you write the book and what is the book about? I think you've kind of said a little bit of that. But I do want to give you the chance to to go in a little bit more detail if you want to at this time. Is uh,
I'd be happy to. So what
okay.
happened in the 1970s, after my parents finally got established, my dad had to learn the language when they came from Hungary to the US. They were frontliners in the Hungarian Revolution in 56. Not a lot of people knew about that war. 2.5 weeks. The Ukraine war now I call the Hungarian Revolution on steroids. Unfortunately, that's been 2 years and counting. That could have happened in Hungary back in the day, during the dark times. I mean, but my parents had just had enough. Besides being frontliners, dad was an OBGYN. He had to double down as a trauma surgeon. So he was working 24/7, 2.5 weeks. My mom was a medical student at the time. She was 11 months away from graduating. She ran the blood bank. And when the war was over and they saw the devastation of Budapest and how their family had split all over, and my dad's parents were killed in Auschwitz back in when he was away at forced labor camp in the 40s. I'm backtracking a little bit, but they had had enough. They loved Mother Hungary, but they didn't buy into Nazi Hungary and Communist Hungary. So they wrote the book in the 70s as an autobiography, basically paper and pencil to a typewriter, to a computer, to a disc. I read it once, probably 30 years ago. Didn't think much of it, except my dad's first escape. But then I reread it. So flash forward 1997, my dad passed away. Unfortunately, 2016, my mom passed away. Just a historian friend of my mom and our family handed me the disc now and said, "You have to read this. You just really need to read it." And I didn't think much of it at the time. I had to take care of mom's affairs, and then I retired for a year. And then a radiologist friend of mine said, I need a little bit of help. We're short. Could you mind working a couple of days a week? So I did from home, and I'm still doing that same job for the last 6 years out of Michigan, even though I'm in Florida now. And that brought me to the book. That brought me to the disc. It's sort of corny. It's my Superman's kryptonite. It sort of summoned me.
Okay.
So between cases, we have two screens as radiologists. The left screen is the patient list. The right screen is the images. And between cases, I loaded up my dad's autobiography on the left and dictated his biography on the right, pretty much changing his first person descriptions to third person. I have to throw in, they wrote the stories as though they'd happened the previous day. They were crisp. They were sharp. My parents were educators. They were Holocaust educators. They were also well-rounded people. Their mastery of English, despite being from a foreign country, was great. They were also into museums and science and the arts, opera, theater, travel, education. So they were very diverse people. So, but the way they wrote the descriptions, the way the table was set, the sights, the smells, the sounds, the fears that my dad felt, the feelings, all there, just and so well done, just by my dad, who's not a professional writer, and neither am I. So a year into it, now we're talking about 2019 or so, and we queried some agents and publishers, and it's sort of a dull biography. It's point A to B to C. So we weren't getting very much success. So I sent the book to a couple of beta readers, one of which a Jewish lady from Rhode Island. Thank you, Lisa Tenner, also a book coach and a writer. She hooks me up with Janice Harper, my co-author. She also has a Michigan connection, a Michigan State anthropologist, professional writer, and a great book coach. and she turned the book around. The history of the book, she made the difference. So rewrote the book and made it more of a novel. So the stories are same, the stories are true, but parallel stories, converging stories, letters to and from home, conversations, really lit up the book, really
Okay.
enlivened it.
Is
And
it,
so thanks to her. And then the proposal package, we got shoestring catch, bottom of the ninth. We picked up Amsterdam Publishers and they ran with it. And now the book's been out for a year and change. And it's doing well. I mean, there's a lot to talk about within the book. We've won 4 awards. Very proud of that. I'm very humbled by it. I don't even know what to do with that yet. It's just the
Mhm.
anniversary of the second award. And they kind of just flew in. And it tells me the importance of people in the know that are reading the book that think it's a good quality book and also know the importance of the subject matter. So it was really self-motivating for me to do this book. I could not leave the story on a computer or on a piece of plastic and decided I just want to share it with the world. And so,
Okay.
yeah, it's an
I,
autobiography turned bio and very exciting. It's an
I
adventure.
I hear you. I hear you. Let me. I want to ask this question, and that is it just about your father, or does it also include your mom in this? Because I hear you said both of them, I think, are deceased now. Am I correct about that?
That's a great question. So there's 3 parts to the book. The first part is sort of my dad's family upbringing. There's an arc in the book. My dad was kind of a spoiled kid. His dad used to beat him sometimes, which I didn't know when he was late, but he kept him disciplined. But my dad was sort of a spoiled kid because he was raised. His dad was a dentist, by the way, and he was a captain on a Red Cross ship in World War One. These are other things that I didn't know until I sort of delved into my dad's story. So we talk about his childhood, but the book starts off with my dad going to his first forced labor camp. So it's a little bit out of order. It's sort of, you try to do it in a movie type order, but it goes back and forth to how my dad was raised, how he missed his family, he missed the luxuries that he had. And the lesson there was whatever happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. And that's another big lesson that I like to throw out there. So
Okay.
and then part 2 is about the Hungary under the Nazis, which is pretty ugly, pretty harrowing. 50 million people died in World War II, including the vast majority of Hungarian Jews. They were just carted away in 1944, just towards the end of the war, 43, 44, while World War II was coming to an end. So that's part 2, and then the disarray in Hungary, the reassembling of the infrastructure, my
Okay.
dad having trouble getting into medical school because he was Jewish.
Okay,
Finally did. There was a
Wolf,
quota.
let me get in. Let me get in because I want to ask you something else because we only have about 30 minutes. I'm trying to get as much of this as we
No
possibly
problem.
can. Now, I noticed your dad finally kind of escaped, came to the United States. Am I correct about that?
His 4th escape, their final escape, yes, was to the
Final,
United States.
okay, okay. So, do you want to just talk a little bit about, tell us a little bit about the escape and how he got to the United States? Because obviously he went through something to get through that, and we're trying to move this along as much as I
No
possibly
problem.
can.
All right. Well, he had 4. The first one I remembered from the first time I read the book. The first one was from under Nazi Hungary. He was in forced labor camp with his friend Frank. They knew that the war was probably coming to an end, but they didn't have much information. The middle of nowhere in the cold Carpathian Mountains in the foothills, and they had about 3 days to decide what day they're going to escape. And it was dusk. The lights were getting dim in the middle of the mountains, and they took off and got away. They actually got away, and the description is so amazing: the escape, the running, the stumbling and bumbling. A third guy tried to follow them, which they were not happy with. The third guy got caught, and you can imagine what they were listening to while they were hauling the third guy back to their platoon because they thought it was a death march. So they escaped, but they didn't know where they were going to go. So it was a harrowing trek to get to Budapest, and
Mhm.
then they had some good things and bad things, and then somebody double crossed them. They took them in a truck and took them into what they called the dog pound, and so they were arrested and imprisoned again, where they escaped from, right in front of Nazi headquarters in Budapest. So an amazing story, amazing timing and miracles. So that was number 2. Third one, he was a med student. He was and changed his mind. He was under communist Hungary, made it all the way to the Austrian border, cloak and dagger stories, arguing with armed Russian soldiers, and gets away with it. But changed his mind. For fear of reprisal, his medical career, he turned around, went back, and he was on call the next night, and nobody even knew he was gone. So, and then finally, the 4th escape, and part 3 of the book is my dad and my mom couldn't stand it anymore under communist Hungary. So after the Hungarian Revolution and all that they had to do, they were, like I said, they were frontliners. They saw how devastating the war was, and how the communist hardliners were clamping down. People were not allowed to leave, including my parents. It was a very difficult trek to get through the border, but they did it. And then they end up in Vienna. The book ends up in Vienna. They actually had help from a priest, which is great. And the priest, my parents donated to his parish every year once they got to the United States and settled, until the gentleman died. So they faced anti-Semitism throughout. Even the guy helping them escape through muddy, cold farms with Russian lights and planes overhead, looking for all these refugees. They got through it. Cold, wet, muddy, and made it. And so that was my dad and my mom. That was her. Mom had it, I can't say easier, but during World War II, as a kid, she was hiding out in farms and small towns with her mom and
Okay.
grandmother. So there aren't as many of these stories, but my dad's viewpoint different, because escape, and then not only Nazi Hungary. Well, let's say this: if the United States had rescued Hungary instead of Russia, for example, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be raised in Hungary, and if lucky,
Okay.
practicing
Right.
medicine in Hungary. But things change. So
Right. Well, that's where life works for us
they ended up in the
sometimes.
United States, in
Yeah.
57, January
Uh,
57, and that's a harrowing ride too, in the
okay.
North Atlantic. But they made it to New York, and then to Providence, Boston, and Detroit ultimately. So
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you this, because this is the gist of my podcast. I have people gone through quite a bit, and I doubt that anybody is listening to this podcast has gone through what your dad or your mom has gone through. But some people have had some difficult a journey, their childhood or whatever it might be. And in my podcast, I'm always trying to get someone who has a story or who has shared about a story that has been very inspiring, has been kind of encouraging. So knowing what you have gone through and sharing your daddy's story and your mom's story, what would you say to uh, someone who is listening to this podcast who may be dealing with some really very trying moments in their lives, difficult moments?
well, I would
Uh,
wish, first of all, I'd wish them better times, better days ahead, and pray,
okay,
and
okay.
hopefully, and some things, I'm a doctor, so I know some things are incurable. Some people suffer from medicine, and now war, and pestilence, of course, with the COVID. But
Mhm.
for me, it was just the motivation that I don't even know how I could survive what my dad went through it. And that to me is inspiring in itself. It changed my attitude about people. It changed my attitude about the dark world. And I can only say to people, if you read this book, it'll probably change how you feel. You not only because of the messages, but also because you'll empathize with my dad. You'll put yourself in his place and realize, even in this free world, that what might happen to my dad could happen to any one of us, whether it's a bad neighbor, bad business deal, bad local government, bad federal government, foreign government, natural disaster. Some of us could be on the run, and not only on the run, because when my dad escaped, every time he had nowhere to go. He didn't know when his next meal was coming
Mhm.
from. He didn't know where his house was going to be, or if he could even reach his house. And it's hard. And I mean, I don't, thank God I'm lucky, I guess. I feel that as Americans, as people in the free world, I think we should try to appreciate what we have. I know a lot of people have hardship.
Right.
Fortunately, hopefully most of us don't. We focus on our careers and our families, and more than just food and survival and shelter. Do things to amuse ourselves, entertain ourselves. And if you're bored, change vectors. Do
Mhm.
something different. Accountability. Do something. Give back to the community. Write a book, write a play, write a poem, write
Mhm.
an opera. Go to an opera. Go to a concert. Do something. Spend time with your family. Do something because life is short. Time is short. And my dad used to say with his Hungarian accent all the time, enjoy every moment, he used to say. And so that was an inspiration to me too. And I didn't even know what that meant until I've done his project and
Okay.
released the book. So, and I can only say that to other people. And I know it's tough, but we will get through these hard times. And
Okay.
in the meantime, love thy brother. And I don't want to sound like I'm corny there, but I mean it. I mean, I need help. I can't fight anti-Semitism myself or racism. We need our Judeo-Christian values and our Muslim brethren. And I do have a lot of Muslim friends, Christian friends, Asian friends, and
Mhm.
accountability means stop blaming certain groups just because events happen around the world. COVID, 9/11, October 7th, whatever, even January 6th. Stop blaming the wrong people. I mean, it's, you got to
Okay.
do your homework, read up, but if you read this book, I think it'll change. It
Okay.
certainly changed my attitude and many of my friends. And
Well said. I get that, and I think listeners of this podcast can feel where you're coming from. Listeners, don't go anyplace. Hang around. Just for a moment, 'cause I got a few more questions I want to ask Dr. Wolf. Dr. Wolf, first of all, I want to ask you if somebody's interested in your book or your website or how they can learn more about what you're doing. Uh, how would they be able to get more information on you? Where can they find your book? Could you give us a little
sure.
information on that?
Right. So the book is called Not a Real Enemy, The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. You can see the 4 awards on it. Still proud, and I owe it to my team. It's another great message out of this book is I couldn't have done it by myself. Great team.
Mhm.
But you can Google Not a Real Enemy, or you can Google Robert J. Wolf, MD, and you'll probably find me. I should be at the top of the list. I'm on social media across the board at Robert J. Wolf, MD, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Meta. Actually, Twitter's now X, and I've got my Facebook author page. So that's Not a Real Enemy by Robert Wolf. YouTube channel, Robert J. Wolf, MD. Website, robertjwolfmd.com. If you want to see more videos, podcasts, 20 TV interviews, we've amassed quite a bit of material. A great website, a great guy that's helping me with the website, robertjwolfmd.com. Other videos and photos related to the wars and communist and Nazi Hungary if you want to delve a little further.
Okay.
The book is available at Amazon. That's the easiest. If you just Google Not a Real Enemy, hardback, paperback, or ebook. Ebook's free with Kindle Unlimited, or inexpensive without. Our audiobook is coming out soon, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, so that will be available, proud to say. The book is also available at Barnes & Noble. You go into the brick and mortar or just order online. Walmart, Tufts University at the bookstore, my alma mater, and at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C., as well as the Illinois Holocaust Museum, both places where I've been honored to be able to do presentations. And the one in DC has already invited me to come back a second time. And that is so humbling. Hard enough to get a book on the shelves there, let alone being asked
Okay.
to go for a second. And that is such a wonderful experience. I could do that every day. That was such a great experience. So
Okay.
talking to the
All
kids.
right. Okay. Thank you for
I know
giving
it's a long list. I'm
this.
sorry.
Yeah.
It's
No problem.
it's a long list.
Yeah. Well, they can get one of these lists and remember
Not a
exactly
real
one
enemy.
of them.
Just
Yeah,
yeah.
not a real enemy. That's the key thing. Let me. You mentioned racism and anti-Semitism, and so I want to ask you at least a little something about that. Uh, how do you think that reading your book and sharing the stories of your parents could help curtail racism and anti-Semitism?
It's the best question you can ask, and everybody does. And I probably have a different answer to that every time. But we're doing it. I'm doing a lot of podcasts. The book, you can see that there's anti-Semitism in the background. You're Jewish, you're screwed. And that's not right. And people realize that and my poor dad's on the run. He's not a criminal. He was a doctor, and his dad was a doctor, a dentist, and these people contributed to society. They gave to charity, they contributed, and still, no matter what, they were chased down and treated badly, and second-class citizens, not only slave labor or murder. You couldn't own a radio, you couldn't have a Jewish wedding, all of these things. So I'm trying to spread the word about how things could be. Let's under, say, Sharia law. I mean, let's say, God forbid, that the Muslim, the hardcore people take over in this country, and we have to abide under a different type of law that we're not used to. I mean, it's completely, and I don't want that to happen. I want our team to do just that. We team up and we fight this. We do the classroom. If somebody likes the book, a review would help. Invite me to do a book presentation where those are well received. I do a nice little book presentation with a book signing. It helps educate people. And the more people that know about it, and this is just one of many Holocaust books, and they all have their own variation, but it also covers the communists too and how they treated the Jewish people. So, and ultimately, I want the book to be taught in the classroom. I mean, that's whether it's college professors, that's difficult to penetrate curricula, but we are going to try. I've been invited already to University of South Carolina to do a book presentation. I just got invited to the Holocaust Museum in Long Island, and I'm in talks with the ones in Houston and Michigan. And we'll get the places, we'll get a lot of people in those places. And then synagogues, JCCs, museums. I just want to spread the word, and it's just education. It's education starts at home. But it's also in the classroom. And I don't think seventh grade, eighth grade is too young to start teaching about fighting hate. So
Okay.
keep doing that. Hopefully we can curtail it. Can't cure it. It's never going to go away completely, you know. So
Right.
that we know, but do our best to curtail it.
Okay. One last question. After your dad got to the United States, could you just talk a little bit about what it was like for him getting here?
Difficult, you know. As when I was an intern, I used to make fun of the Asian kids that were interns that were foreign medical grads, could barely speak English when they presented patients. And I feel badly about that now because my dad went through that trying to learn. He took elementary and high school English when he was in Boston while he was redoing his OBGYN residency. So talk about doubling down. It was tough for them. My mom's father picked them up in New York when they got to Ellis Island. They had to process them. It wasn't too harrowing, a few hours. Great side story. They had a flat tire, which is kind of how I wanted to end the book right there, because that would be just one big laugh. Like, oh boy, a flat tire, big deal. You know, we got a flat tire here, and it's a major. It ruins the whole day. But it'd be like, oh, this is nothing, right? So they ended up in Providence, Rhode Island for a while before my dad redid his residency. It was tense because my mom hadn't seen her father. They were divorced for many years to protect their family name, by the way. They were divorced. My mom's mother, who ended up in Israel, with the stepfather, who's in the book too. He helped them tremendously, helped my parents. And her father, after not seeing him for 18 years, they were living with them and his second wife now. And it was kind of a strange, weird feeling for them. They felt kind of worthless. They felt like they couldn't contribute until my dad got a residency in Boston and then moved along. And it took a while. No jobs in Boston when he finished, but he ended up in Detroit, where the job market was pretty good at the time, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so they thrived there finally. And then hence they did their story, giving back to the community that way and other ways too. So
Okay.
yeah, pretty harrowing. It wasn't easy, and
Yeah.
that would be part two, but not as exciting as the book part one. But it could be a separate book because they
Okay.
did go through quite a bit.
All right. Well, uh, Robert Wolf, we thank you so very much for sharing this story of your parents. And I'm certain that listeners of this podcast will appreciate listening. And hopefully they will attempt to, and we'll get your book to learn more about racism and anti-Semitism, which I think is something that would be very educational.
Feedback welcome. Everything
Yeah,
helps.
yeah.
Everything helps. Reviews, feedback, talks, anything.
Okay.
Reach out.
All right. And so there you have it. Uh, Robert Wolf sharing with us today. And until next time, peace and blessings be with each of you.